What if everything you thought you knew about that night was a lie? What if Michael Jackson didn't die that day? What if he walked out of that ambulance alive? I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And the truth is far darker than you could ever imagine. You're about to hear what really happened that day. The truth about Michael Jackson's death. The truth that no one dared to tell you. But that was just the beginning of a nightmare I couldn't escape. It was June 25th, 2009. I never expected the events that unfolded that day to follow me for years. The world mourned. Michael Jackson, gone, taken too soon, the king of pop. The media spread the news like wildfire, and the crowds gathered devastated. But what no one knew, what I saw, could never be known. Not then, not now. I was in Los Angeles working as usual, nothing out of the ordinary. But as soon as I heard the sirens, I knew something was happening. I wasn't supposed to be at the hospital that day, but I found myself there, caught in the chaos. I wasn't the only one. The streets were full of people, all of us waiting for news, for some kind of closure. But then something caught my eye. It was an ambulance. It came in faster than the others, almost. Deliberately. I don't know why I paid attention to it more than the others. Maybe it was the way it turned the corner. Maybe it was just the feeling in the air that day. But I felt it, the tension, thick as smoke. There was something wrong. Something wasn't right. The world was acting like it knew what was happening, but deep down, I knew better. I had no idea how right I was. I stood at the edge of the crowd, trying to stay out of the way, but unable to look away. The doors of the ambulance opened. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought they were bringing someone in, someone who needed help. But when the doors opened, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a body. It wasn't anyone being rushed into the hospital for care. Number. It was something else. It was Michael Jackson, or at least it looked like him. My heart slammed into my chest. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing things. Maybe it was the shock of everything happening. But no. There he was, stepping out of that ambulance on his own. Alive. He wasn't being carried. He wasn't being wheeled on a stretcher. He was walking, moving with purpose. The way a person would walk if they didn't want anyone to see them. I couldn't breathe. I froze, caught in a trance. Was this some kind of mistake? How could he be alive? How could I have seen this? Was it a double, a decoy? The world had already declared him dead. How could he possibly be walking? But there he was, stepping down onto the pavement, his figure barely visible beneath the dim light, but unmistakably him. He wore sunglasses, a surgical mask, just enough to obscure his identity, but not enough to hide that it was him. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't have made sense, but I saw it. I saw him with my own eyes. The crowd didn't notice. They were too distracted by the chaos in the front, by the media frenzy, by the flashes of cameras going off as if this was some kind of show. But I wasn't looking at the cameras. I wasn't watching the frenzy. I was watching him, Michael Jackson, walking out of that ambulance like it was just another day. He moved quickly, with urgency, but no one seemed to care. No one seemed to see what I was seeing. It wasn't just his walk that stuck with me. It was the look in his eyes when he glanced up. Just for a split second, his eyes met mine. I don't know why I remember it so clearly, but I do. I could see fear, But it wasn't fear of the people around him. It was fear of something else. Fear of being exposed. Fear of being caught. Fear of the truth getting out. And then he disappeared behind the hospital doors, vanishing into the building with the same sense of purpose as when he stepped out of that ambulance. The door slammed shut, and for a moment, I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to understand what I had just seen. My mind raced. I couldn't process it. How was he alive? How could he be standing there? And yet, the world believed he was dead. I wasn't just confused. I was terrified. Terrified of what I had just witnessed, terrified of the implications, terrified of the truth I didn't want to face. But it didn't end there. No, that was just the beginning. Because when they wheeled out the stretcher, the one with the body that everyone thought was his, no one questioned it. The media surrounded it, the fans cried, and the world mourned. But I knew what I had seen. The body they paraded out wasn't his. It wasn't Michael. It was a decoy, a cover-up, and no one even noticed. I thought about running to the media, to tell someone, to scream out what I had seen, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was something in the air that stopped me, something I couldn't put into words. The fear that if I told the world, if I spoke up, the truth would come for me, too. I wasn't supposed to know this. I wasn't supposed to be there. And I certainly wasn't supposed to see what I saw. And maybe I would pay the price for it. I didn't tell anyone. I tried to forget it. I convinced myself that it was a mistake, that I had imagined it, that it was just a trick of the light. But no matter how much I tried to push it out of my mind, the image of him walking out of that ambulance stayed with me. Every night, it haunted me. And I still don't know why I was the one who saw it. Was I meant to see it? Was I supposed to stay quiet? Maybe you'll never believe me. Maybe you'll think I'm just crazy. But I know what I saw. And there's no going back from that. But what happened next? That's when everything changed. The building was nothing like I expected. The outside, towering and silent, looked like any other hospital. But as I stepped through the automatic doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air inside was thick, heavy, almost. But the scent was clean. Too clean, as if the space had been scrubbed to perfection and left empty. Even the light, bright and soft, felt almost too soft. I took a few steps forward, my shoes clicking on the polished floor. The hallway stretched out in front of me, its walls a pale beige, almost sterile. The light seemed to wash out the colors, and the faint hum of the fluorescent bulbs above added an unnatural stillness to the space. I should have felt at ease. Everything was pristine, quiet. But that's just it. It felt like the calm before a storm. The walls were lined with abstract art, pieces so meticulously arranged. They didn't seem to belong here. They were too perfect, too calculated, as if someone had picked them to make the space feel normal. But there was no soul in them. The frames were neat, but the pictures, they didn't seem to hold any life. Their colors were muted, their subjects too still. I glanced at the receptionist's desk. Empty. That shouldn't have been strange. It was late, after all, but it felt strange. The desk was too clean, too organized. It had an emptiness to it. The kind of emptiness that pulls you in, makes you wonder why it's so perfect. A cold glass of water sat on the edge of the counter. untouched. As I walked deeper, I could feel the walls close in. Not literally, but in a way that made my chest tighten. I found myself shifting from foot to foot, though there was no real reason for it. I just couldn't stand still. Something about the stillness of the place made me feel uneasy. The hallway was empty, too quiet. No sounds of footsteps, no voices, not even the murmur of distant conversations. The only noise was the soft hum from somewhere above me, like a machine that never stopped. I took a few more steps. The door to my left was slightly ajar, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move across the frame. I blinked, but the door was still. I didn't remember hearing it open, but I moved past it, telling myself it was nothing, just my nerves maybe. Then, as I passed, I noticed something strange. The floor beneath me didn't creak. It was unnaturally smooth, too perfect. It felt like walking on marble, but the air had a chill to it, making the skin on my arms stand up. I ran my hand along the back of the chair near me instinctively, but it felt colder than I expected, like it hadn't been used in a while. I pulled my hand back, almost as if I was afraid the chair might bite me. Something caught my eye at the far end of the hall, a window with the curtains drawn. But light, no, not light exactly, was pouring through, casting odd shapes across the floor. There was something unsettling about the shadows, how they curved and stretched in ways they shouldn't. They weren't natural. For a moment, I thought I saw movement in them, but when I looked again, the space was still. Still like it was holding its breath. A sound, soft at first, a hum, faint and far away. I stopped, straining to hear, but the noise was gone as soon as I focused on it. It wasn't the fridge, it wasn't the air conditioning. It came from deeper in the building. It was constant, like a faint electrical buzz, but it was off. Like the sound was just barely perceptible, like it shouldn't be there at all. I walked further. My steps felt louder now, too loud in the silence of the hall. The walls, as plain as they were, felt like they were closing in on me, like they were watching me. I stopped myself, took a breath, tried to shake it off. This was just a hospital. I should be fine. But it didn't feel right. It didn't feel safe. The corner was ahead, a bend that should have led to more sterile white walls, perhaps a few rooms, a nurse station. But when I turned, I didn't see the usual sign of human activity. No medical staff, no patients, just an empty hallway that stretched on too far. It wasn't that it felt deserted. It was that it felt abandoned, like someone had left in a hurry. I could feel my heart rate quicken, but I kept walking, even as the hairs on the back of my neck stood at attention. I couldn't stop myself. My feet kept moving forward, almost as though they were being guided by something I couldn't see. My eyes flicked back to the door I had passed earlier, the one I thought I saw a shadow behind. It was now completely shut, but the strange feeling didn't leave. If anything, it got worse. The air seemed to thicken with every step. I didn't know why I felt so uneasy, but I did. My stomach churned, and I had the overwhelming sensation that something was just out of view, watching me, waiting. I walked faster, trying to shake off the feeling, but that's when it happened. Just as I reached the next corner, I heard something. A soft scrape, like fingernails on a chalkboard. It was so quiet, I almost thought it was in my head. But no, it was real. I froze. It was coming from behind the door I'd passed earlier. I swallowed hard, but I couldn't move. It was as though the world had stopped around me. The door stayed shut. The sound, faint, soft, but undeniably there, kept going. I took a cautious step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Something wasn't right. That's when I realized I was no longer alone. And that was only the beginning of what came next. I had no reason to feel anything other than normal, but that's the thing about unease. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make a loud noise to get your attention. It builds slowly, like a shadow, creeping closer without you realizing it. At first, the space felt fine, calm even. The walls were a soft beige, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights creating a rhythm in the air that should have been soothing. Everything was clean, too clean, and the lighting was warm, welcoming even. It was exactly what you'd expect from a place that was trying to make you feel comfortable, like an overly neat hotel lobby or a waiting room at a doctor's office. Sterile, but somehow inviting. But there was something wrong. Something in the air that didn't sit right with me. The quiet buzz in the back of my mind started as I walked deeper into the building. I glanced around, scanning the room to distract myself from the creeping sensation that something was off. Everyone seemed calm. Too calm. But that was the thing. There was an edge to their calmness, a tightness that didn't belong. I had only been there for a few minutes when I noticed the first thing out of place. A guest across the room, someone I hadn't spoken to, was watching me. I didn't catch his eye at first, but I felt it, like a pull. And then I glanced across the room and met his gaze. His eyes locked with mine. And for just a second, everything froze. His expression shifted, and his smile faltered for the briefest moment before he quickly turned away, his body jerking slightly as though he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't have. The smile, what I could see of it, was forced. But it wasn't just that. There was something else, something in the way he looked at me. Something in his posture. It was almost as though he was warning me. It sent a chill straight through me, one that didn't quite make sense. It wasn't that he was threatening, but more like he knew something that I didn't. And the moment we shared felt like a secret passing between us. I tried to shake it off. I told myself that maybe it was just the strangeness of the situation, of the building, of the fact that I was still getting used to the idea of everything that was happening. But deep down, the feeling only grew stronger. I moved further into the hall, my footsteps echoing against the polished floor. I couldn't place it. There was a door just behind a velvet curtain near the far end of the hall. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then I did. I don't know why. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it seemed to pull me in. I found myself walking past it several times, always telling myself I had no business going near it. I glanced at the door again, and this time I noticed something strange. It was locked, but the lock didn't seem right. It was an old-fashioned brass keyhole, the kind that looked like it belonged to a completely different era. But it wasn't the lock that bothered me. It was the way it felt. The room behind it felt too still, too silent. I could almost hear the emptiness that echoed back from the other side. I wasn't even sure why I felt drawn to it. There was no real reason. And yet, I couldn't stop looking at it. Every time I passed, it felt as though something was waiting behind that door, Something that didn't want to be seen, didn't want to be found. I forced myself to look away, telling myself that it was nothing, just the weird energy of the place. But I knew better. It wasn't nothing. Then, I moved past the door and entered a larger room. I wasn't expecting it to be anything special, but what I saw was unsettling. The celebrity, who was supposed to be the host, was pacing back and forth, his movements stiff, almost mechanical. I'd heard of the person before, seen the face on TV, admired the work. But here, in person, there was something wrong. His eyes never quite met mine. He'd glance at me, but only for a moment before looking away, like he was scanning the space for something else, something more important than acknowledging my presence. I found it strange, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it was nerves, that it wasn't anything worth making a fuss about. But the thing that bothered me the most wasn't just the way he avoided eye contact. It was how he moved. He was walking, but it was as if he was following a script. The way he'd stop, then turn. Too precise, too rehearsed. Like he knew exactly where he was supposed to be, what he was supposed to do. But none of it felt natural. I felt an involuntary shiver crawl up my spine. His smile was tight, and his voice, when he spoke, was flat, almost robotic. He wasn't speaking like someone engaged, someone in the moment. It was as if he was reading from a teleprompter. Every word felt hollow. I shook my head, dismissing it. He was probably just tired, maybe overwhelmed by the attention. But still, something nagged at me. It was the way his shoulders tensed up, how he'd glance over his shoulder, like something was waiting for him to finish whatever he was doing. I looked around the room, trying to distract myself from the unease creeping up my neck. The furniture, the paintings on the wall, they all looked fine. Perfect, even. Too perfect. The more I looked at the space, the more I realized how strangely polished everything was. Too polished. Nothing seemed out of place, but it didn't feel right either. It felt like it had been set up specifically for me to notice it. It felt like it was all designed to make me feel like I belonged, but I didn't. I glanced back toward the locked door I'd passed earlier. I wasn't sure why I cared so much, but the thought of it stayed with me. Something in that room, behind that door, seemed like it was supposed to stay hidden. Then, as I turned my attention back to the host, he stopped pacing abruptly. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, his expression shifted, and I could have sworn I saw fear. Fear of something just out of sight. He looked right at me again, and this time I could feel the weight of his gaze. It wasn't the same look as before. This one was colder, empty. And that's when I realized this wasn't just some bad luck. Something much darker was at play here. The tension had already started to build, but it was nothing compared to what was coming next. I thought I was just being paranoid, maybe overthinking things. But the more I tried to ignore it, the clearer it became. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in the air, like the tension before a storm. At first, it was small things. A shadow that lingered too long. A guest who smiled, but never quite met my eyes. But that moment, the moment everything shifted, made me realize this wasn't just some bad vibe. No, it was something much darker. Something far worse. I had walked past that locked door earlier, the one hidden behind a velvet curtain. It called to me, the way a secret always does, pulling me in without me even realizing it. I kept telling myself that there was nothing behind it, nothing worth seeing. But the way the shadows clung to the cracks around the door, the way they stretched unnaturally, it haunted me. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. And that's when everything began to change. As I moved further down the hall, the silence grew heavier. It wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, like the walls were closing in. I stopped for a moment, standing in the middle of the hallway, feeling that strange tug in my chest. I glanced behind me. The door at the far end was still there, locked just as I remembered. But something wasn't right. It felt closer now. Or maybe I was just imagining it. I was just about to walk away when I heard it. A soft, creaking sound, barely perceptible at first. Like a chair shifting, a door opening, something moving. But the hallway was empty. I spun around, my heart racing. There was nothing. No one. No sound. Just the dead, heavy silence that hung in the air. I let out a shaky breath, trying to calm myself. It was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe the building was old. Maybe I was tired. But the feeling lingered. The air around me felt colder now, colder than it had a minute ago. I rubbed my arms to warm them, but the chill remained, like it was seeping through the walls, creeping under my skin. Then, the door moved. It wasn't loud, but I saw it, just enough for me to realize what was happening. The locked door I had passed earlier was slowly opening. Not much, just enough for the darkness beyond to spill out into the hallway. I froze. I had been standing there just moments before, and the door had been shut. I was certain of it. There was no way it could have opened on its own. But there it was, the faint crack between the door frame, the dark room behind it beckoning, pulling at me. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavier now, thick with something I couldn't name. I could hear my breath, shallow and quick, as I reached out for the doorknob. But the closer I got, the colder it became. The temperature dropped, the chill biting at my skin like an invisible presence. I stopped just before I touched the knob, my fingers hovering over it. A low hum filled the air, a buzzing sound that I couldn't place. It seemed to come from everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. My mind raced. Was this normal? Was it the building? But why did it feel so wrong? I pulled my hand back and took a step away from the door, my eyes never leaving the crack in the wood. The door stood there, half open, like it was waiting for me. Then I heard footsteps, slow, measured, as though someone was walking toward me, no, behind me. I whipped around, my heart slamming against my chest, but there was no one there. Nothing, only empty space. I could feel the sweat on my palms, the weight of the air pressing down on me. I was breathing faster now, my hands shaking. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave, to run out of that building and never look back. But my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen, paralyzed by the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. Then it happened. The door creaked again, this time wider. A small movement, but enough to send a jolt through my body. I looked at it, and this time, I saw something. A figure standing in the darkened room, just beyond the crack in the door. I couldn't make out any details, just a shadow standing motionless in the dark. I gasped, taking a step back. But the figure didn't move. It was waiting waiting for me to come closer, waiting for something I didn't understand. The air around me was suffocating now, the silence so thick I could barely breathe. Every noise, every creak, every whisper of the building seemed amplified, pressing in on me. I looked at the door again. It was still open, just slightly, but the shadows beyond it seemed deeper now, like they were pulling me in. My hands were clammy, and I wiped them against my pants, trying to steady my breathing. I tried to walk away, but my feet wouldn't move. The dread that had been creeping up my spine had turned into full-blown panic now. I could hear my own breath, too loud in the thick silence, and I knew that something terrible was about to happen. But I didn't leave. I couldn't. The door was there. The shadow was there. And I had to know what was behind it. I forced myself to take a step toward it. Then came the real shock. The door slammed shut in front of me, as if something or someone had pushed it closed from the inside. My pulse raced. I stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. I could feel my heart pounding against my chest, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I hadn't even touched the door. It had closed on its own, and I had no idea what was on the other side. I wasn't sure when it started, the crack in my mind. Maybe it was when the door slammed shut, or maybe it was before that, when the first shadow lingered too long, when the walls closed in on me. But now, standing in the middle of this cold, empty hallway, I felt it, the pressure, the weight of something I couldn't escape. It wasn't the building. It wasn't the shadows. It wasn't even the locked door at the end of the hall. It was me. I could feel my mind beginning to unravel, threads of reality pulling apart with every breath I took. It wasn't just fear. It was confusion, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Like I was already too deep in something I couldn't find my way out of. And the worst part, I didn't know if it was real. I glanced at the door again, the one that had been closed on me. The darkness behind it was calling me, and I didn't want to hear it, didn't want to feel it, but I couldn't stop myself. I took a step toward it, my feet heavy, as though they were sinking into the floor with every move. And then I heard it. At first, it was a whisper, too faint to understand, but it was there, floating in the air around me. It wasn't just the normal noise of the building settling or the hum of the lights overhead. No, this was something else. A voice, soft, melodic, but full of an unease I couldn't place. I froze. It wasn't just the sound of it. It was the feeling. The feeling that it was speaking to me in a way that shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't coming from anywhere specific, but it felt like it was everywhere at once, coming from inside my head, from beneath the floorboards, from the walls themselves. I told myself I was hearing things, that it was just my nerves. But the longer I stood there, the clearer it became. The voice was speaking to me. You shouldn't be here. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move, afraid that if I did, I'd somehow wake up from this nightmare, this illusion. But the longer I stood, the harder it was to deny. I wasn't just hearing things. The voice wasn't just a whisper. It was a presence that was inside me, tangled with my thoughts, scraping at the edges of my sanity. It was inescapable now. I turned away from the door, my hands shaking as I gripped the walls for support. But that didn't help. Nothing helped. The air was thick, heavy, suffocating. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, the beat of my heart echoing through the silence. I couldn't breathe. And then I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. Just standing there, watching me. I blinked. Sure, I was imagining it, but when I opened my eyes, it was still there. Just beyond the dim light, standing perfectly still, its outline too vague to make out any real details. But the presence was undeniable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my body wouldn't obey. My feet were glued to the floor, my legs stiff, frozen in place by some invisible force. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me, waiting. You don't belong here. The voice came again, clearer this time. It wasn't just a whisper now. It was a command, an echo that surged through my veins, making me feel like I was suffocating in my own skin. The figure's outline blurred for a moment, like it was flickering in and out of existence, but it stayed. It stayed in the hallway, right where I couldn't escape it. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the wall beside me. The surface was cold, unnaturally cold, like ice was running through the walls. I jerked my hand back, but the chill stayed in my bones, a lingering sensation that wouldn't go away. The lights above flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls, and for a brief moment the hallway felt wrong, too long, too narrow. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath to regain some control, but when I opened them, the figure was closer. It hadn't moved, I had. And that's when it hit me. The hallway was longer. The space I had walked through was gone, replaced by more darkness. I looked behind me. The door I had passed earlier wasn't there anymore. There was nothing but a cold stretch of empty hallway, stretching endlessly into the dark. The walls seemed to curve inwards, pushing me forward. There was no escape, no way out. It's too late. The voice came again. Clearer, louder, more insistent. I could feel it now, crawling beneath my skin, inside my thoughts. I wasn't just hearing the voice. I was becoming it. I was becoming the thing that was haunting me, the thing that didn't want me to leave. And that's when I saw the reflection. At first, it was just a flicker in the corner of my eye. But when I turned my head to look, I saw it. A figure standing beside me, but it wasn't mine. It was wrong. It looked like me, but it wasn't. Its eyes were empty, hollow, like two black pits that swallowed everything around them. It smiled at me, but it wasn't my smile. It was something else, something terrible. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. The figure moved, mimicking me, but it wasn't me. It was something else, something that had taken my place. And then it spoke, its voice like the one I had been hearing all along. You're already lost. I reached for the door, my hand trembling as I touched the cold handle. But when I pulled it open, I was met with nothing but darkness, pure, suffocating darkness. It swallowed me whole. And in that moment, I realized I was never supposed to leave. And that's when everything changed. I couldn't breathe. The moment the door slammed shut behind me, I was paralyzed. My body refused to obey me. My legs wouldn't move. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I was standing in the hallway, heart pounding, the thudding of it so loud I thought it might burst. Every inch of me screamed to run, to escape, but I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching the shadows stretch and twist in the dim light. The coldness I had felt before wasn't just in the air, it was in my skin. It had seeped into my bones, into my very being. I felt like I wasn't even in my own body anymore. Like I was trapped somewhere between what I knew and what I feared. It wasn't just the door. It wasn't the shadows. It was the feeling. The sense that something was wrong in a way I couldn't even comprehend. And I didn't know what to do with it. I tried to take a step forward, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't force them to, no matter how much I told myself to just move. Every fiber of my being was frozen, stuck in the middle of this nightmare. I was trapped in the hallway, trapped in my own terror. What had I seen? What had just happened? The reflection. The thing that wasn't me, that wasn't my face, was that real? The room, the shadow, the thing behind the door. It was all too much, too fast. And it didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Then, something in my mind clicked, like the last puzzle piece falling into place. I remembered the whispers, the ones I thought I'd imagined, the ones that felt too real. You're already lost. I wasn't imagining it. It was real. The voice, the figure, the door that shouldn't have been open, none of it was a trick of my mind. It was all real, and I had been pulled into something I couldn't escape. I snapped my head around, my breath catching in my throat, desperate to get away. But the hallway, it had changed. I was sure it had been shorter before. The walls seemed to stretch farther now, like they were closing in on me. The dim light overhead flickered, and for a brief second, I saw it. The reflection of myself, but not the way it should have been. It was like a shadow. Something off, something wrong. I turned again, the panic rising. I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't want to. But then, I realized the worst part. I couldn't leave. I bolted forward, moving as fast as I could, my feet slapping against the floor, desperate to escape, but no matter how fast I moved, the hallway stretched. It didn't end. I had been walking for what felt like hours, but I hadn't gone anywhere. My body was burning, my lungs aching for air, but I couldn't get away from this place. It felt like the walls were moving with me, pushing me further into the labyrinth of my own mind. Get out! The voice whispered again. Closer this time. I spun around, convinced it was behind me, but there was nothing. Nothing but the empty hallway. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing. I didn't know how much more I could take. I felt like I was losing my mind. Like the reality around me was slipping, twisting into something darker, something worse. The fear that had been growing since the moment I stepped into that building had now turned into a suffocating weight, pressing on me from all sides. I had no control. I had no power over what was happening to me. The darkness in the hallway felt alive. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it creeping closer with each step I took. The light overhead flickered again, casting shadow that seemed to dance, mocking me. The walls were closing in faster now, and my breath was shallow, panicked. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like I wasn't even sure which direction I was going anymore. Then I heard something, a low, guttural sound, like breathing. Not mine. Something else. Something that didn't belong here. It wasn't loud at first, just a hum in the back of my mind, but it grew louder with every step. Closer. Closer. I turned again, heart in my throat, And that's when I saw it. Movement. At the end of the hallway, where the shadows were thickest, something was standing. I couldn't see it clearly at first, but I knew it was there, watching me. It wasn't just the shadows. It was a figure. No, it was a presence. I could feel it, like it was waiting for me. "You can't leave," it whispered. And I felt its cold fingers tighten around my chest, around my mind. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything in me screamed to run, but my body didn't respond. I was paralyzed, trapped in the terror of it. The hallway stretched on endlessly, and the figure remained, growing darker, larger with each passing second. And then, in the silence, something clicked. A voice. No, not a voice. A memory rushed through me. It was from earlier when I had first entered the building. The whispers, the warning that no one had heard but me. The guest's strange smile, the flickering lights, the shadow that wasn't just a shadow. It was all connected. "You shouldn't be here," the whisper echoed again, and the walls seemed to tremble in response, as though the building itself was alive, breathing. I felt a cold sweat bead on the back of my neck, my hands clammy, shaking uncontrollably. It's too late. The voice in my mind seemed to echo, and with it, I knew it was never meant to be this way. I wasn't just lost. I was part of something, a trap, a game I had no way of winning. I tried to speak, to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The air was so thick now, so heavy, I was drowning in it. And that's when I realized I wasn't gonna make it out of this place. And what was waiting for me behind that door, the one I hadn't even wanted to open, was far worse than anything I could have imagined. But before I could move, before I could react, the figure took a step toward me. And that's when everything changed. I thought it was over, that leaving would be enough to escape whatever had been following me. But now, every night, I feel it, like something just behind me, watching, waiting. It never stops. The shadows that once crept around corners now follow me wherever I go. I can't escape them. They're always there, lurking, just out of sight. And the worst part, I hear it sometimes, whispers, like a voice from a place I can't reach, telling me I'm not free. Maybe I never will be. Maybe the door is still open, somewhere, waiting for me to step back inside. And when I do, I don't know if I'll ever leave again. Whatever was behind that door, it wasn't human. And it's still out there, watching, waiting.